Many years ago, when I was a kid, my favorite show were HeMan and the Master of the Universe, She-Ra the Princess of Power, and also BraveStarr and Filmation Ghostbusters. And somewhere in US there is a guy, a writer, an awesome artist. They create this awesome story and this character. And his name, my friends, is Rob Lamb. Welcome, Rob, to my show.
Thank you. That is quite an introduction.
Thank you so much. I am very happy to have you right here because I'm a big fan, like I told you in the song, of the fourth show of Filmation that you worked. So I won't start immediately with this phrase. I'll start before the Filmation, when you discover your talent to create story and character.
Well, that process of imagination goes way back to my childhood. Um, my best friend and I, when we were kids, we'd watch TV. We had our favorite shows: Johnny Quest, Star Trek, Lost in Space, a bunch of other ones from the 1960s, and we would act out a lot of the stories, and we'd make up our own stories, and we would act them out in our playtime. And so in school, I would write stories. So I've been a storyteller pretty much my whole life. And then finally, what happened was I wanted to get into animation or into the film business. And so I moved to Los Angeles to try and break into the business. I originally wanted to become a Disney artist, but I couldn't quite get in. And I took art classes, life drawing classes to learn how to draw the human form, and kept trying to get in at different studios at Hanna-Barbera. And I tried once early on at Filmation, didn't quite make it that time. But then one time I was working at an art supply store not too far from the studio. And one of the artists from Filmation, his name was Bob Klein. And it may be familiar to some of you people because he was responsible for a lot of the look and feel of He-Man and Masters of the Universe. He was a very fine artist. Well, he was coming in to buy some supplies and also to get some pictures framed. And I got really excited when I saw his artwork. And I told him about my desire to become, to get into the cartoon business. Well, it just so happened that Filmation needed storyboard artists at that time. They had sold several shows. This was 1981. I was 25 years old. And they needed storyboard artists. And so when I got home, I didn't have any storyboards, so I made one up, kind of a space battle. And I, spent a couple of days drawing it out in a sketchbook. And then when I thought I had enough, I called Carl Gears, who was the head of the storyboard department at that time, and set up an interview. Well, I went in there and Carl looked at my sketchbook and he said, "Well, you got a few problems here and there, but I can see that you know how to tell a story." So he gave me a test. He gave me a script from a Lone Ranger episode and asked me to come up with as many camera angles for one line in the script. And I still remember that line. It was the Lone Ranger was having to give a farmer some bad news that he was going to lose his farm because of something going on with the bad guy in town, and he was going to lose it. And the line I had to illustrate said, "The farmer's shoulders slumped in resignation." And I was given some sheets of storyboard paper, 9 panels on each page. And Carl said, draw as many camera angles as you can think of. All right. So I went home and I started drawing. I did. I staged them on the front porch of the farmer's house with the farmer sitting on the front step and Lone Ranger leaning against a post and Tonto on the horse. And then I did another angle. I did a close up of his hands just ringing. And I filled the page, 9 panels, in about 20 minutes. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to get a job this way. And so I took another sheet of paper and I drew some more angles. I staged them inside the house, leaning against his fireplace, and every close up and camera angle I could think of. When I filled the second sheet, I had, that was 18 drawings. Go, well, I don't know what else to do. So I arranged to come back, and I handed Carl my 2 sheets of paper. He took one look at them and he said, "You're hired." I said, "You're kidding." He said, "Yes. The most I've ever gotten from this test is 3 panels. You gave me 18. And just then, Don Christensen, the line producer, came in, and he was wearing a Hawaiian shirt and Bermuda shorts and sandals or flip-flops. And Carl says, "This is the guy I was telling you about." I went, "You told him about me?" And Don looks at the storyboard panels and says, "Yeah, I see what you mean. Too bad he can't draw worth a crap." And I went, "Oh, I'm done." I just died there. But he kind of half smiled and said, "Well, I can see he knows film. Hire him if you want to." And then he left. And then Carl turns to me and says, "Okay, yeah, your drawing skills are not quite up to our level, but we need storytellers. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to put you on probation for 2 weeks. And at the end of 2 weeks, if you've gotten into the swing of things and you're doing good storyboards, we'll keep you on." I said, "Thank you." So next Monday, I come in, I work. I cleaned up boards for another artist, Don Manuel, who just fantastic work on The New Adventures of Zorro. That was my first show I worked on. And then I got to storyboard a sequence myself, and then later a half a show, and so on. Well, at the end of the 2 weeks, I went into Carl's office and I said, "Well, do I come back next week?" And he looked at me like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Why wouldn't you come back?" I go, and I reminded him about the 2 weeks probation. He goes, "Oh, you would have known you were in trouble a long time ago." I went, "Ugh." And so I got to work at the 1981 season on The New Adventures of Zorro, Hero High, not a good show, Shazam, that was fun, and a little bit on Blackstar, which that's the next story about what Blackstar meant to HeMan. But I was there, and I'll tell you something, drawing 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for 5 months, that's a lot of drawing. I got better. I was also the worst artist in the department. And so I had to get as good as the next guy. And I learned from a lot of the guys were just really good about sharing ideas and saying, "Oh, you should do this way instead of that way." And so I was learning and getting a lot of practice drawing. And by the end of the season, I was on par with most of the rest of the guys. And that was my first year, 1981.
Awesome. And tell me something about the story that you mentioned a few seconds ago, the transition between Blackstar and HeMan. Tell me something about that.
Well, it's because of Blackstar that Filmation got to do HeMan. To give you a little backstory, Mattel had was trying to do toy licenses for the Conan the Barbarian movie, the one with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And that kind of fell through. And they had these designs for a barbarian character. And they hadn't come up with a name. It was going to be Conan. And then they decided, well, we're going to name him something else, changed his hair. And they came up with the name HeMan. But they needed a property. They needed a show to attach it to, and they decided to go with animation since the movie thing didn't work. And so they looked at the two shows that were on the air at the time was our Blackstar from Filmation and Ruby Spears' Thundar the Barbarian. And they were comparing the two shows, and they liked what we did with Blackstar better than Thundar. So they contacted Lou Shimer, and they had meetings and said, this is what we're going to do the show. We want someone to do the show for us. And based on our characters that we have created, we'll make the toys and so on. And Lou Shimer said, I think we can do something with this. And he came up with a really, really good contract. He told the people at Mattel, we won't tell you how to make your toys. You don't tell us how to make cartoons. We are storytellers. You are toy makers. We will try to accommodate as many, whatever toys make sense from a story standpoint. But they did not have script approval. Unlike Hasbro had script approval on G.I. Joe. And they made sure that that was a 30-minute commercial. We at Filmation knew that everybody was going to think it was a commercial, but we tried very hard not to make it a commercial, but make it a valid story and characters that would stand up on their own, even without the toys.
I like that these two difference, this philosophy to do a show, also because in Filmation you created, the people of Filmation, including you, created awesome character that never had a toy at that time. I remember, for example, Shadowweaver at the time, Scorpia for She-Ra, or I-Red for Filmation Ghostbusters, the Mummy, or Sir Transalot. This type of character so cool. They never had a toys in the Toyland that they got, but they are also because of that. I tell you a little story. When I was a kid, I was frustrated because my Master of the Universe figures, they haven't a cartoon accurate likeness, because as a kid I prefer the cartoon than the toys. So is the reason. This is not casual, in my opinion, because of the story. And tell me something about the creation of this character. You told me before that you create some character for Filmation. Tell me some of them. Tell me something about them.
Well, some things were done. There were some characters that were created before I got into writing that were not part of the toy line. The most obvious one was Orko. And there was a deal we had that if Mattel made a toy based upon a Filmation character, then they would have to pay Filmation royalties. Well, because of that, they didn't want to make any Filmation toys from the series. But they finally did make an Orko toy because there was a high demand for it. The kids wanted an Orko toy. And so they thought, oh, okay, we'll make a toy. And they did. And Filmation had to pay Filmation for the licensing for the toy. But what happened was when in second season He-Man, I moved into the writing department. And when I did that, we'd be writing stories using the characters that are already in existence. And then we would create other characters that would be just for that story. And the one I mentioned before we started was Micah of Bright Moon for She-Ra. I had been writing for a little while, and I thought it might be nice to bring more of a family element in it. And so I created the character of King Micah, who was imprisoned on the Horde world, and I have him escape and rejoins his family, Queen Angela and his daughter Glimmer. And I really wanted him to continue in the series. But at the time, our episodes were not shown in sequence. There was not a storyline that would go across multiple episodes. And so many times they would be shown out of order. And so they didn't, fortunately, I had to write that he left his family and went off to fight the Horde somewhere on the other side of the planet, so that would explain why you didn't see him in any other episodes. But I wanted him to stay, but I was overruled by the boss.
Okay, and tell me something about the creation for an episode, because when you become of the writing department, tell me something how work to create the storyline for an episode. Something about the work in progress, the process to create from the beginning or the end. What is your process to create an episode of Master Shira, for example?
All right. Well, I was in there for second season HeMan and first season She-Ra. And the way it worked is that Arthur Nadell, his title was Vice President of Creative Affairs. He was the head of the writing department. And so each of us writers would pitch ideas, usually just like one sentence. Shira gets trapped in a giant spider's web or something. It'd be just one idea or maybe two sentences, and we would submit them on a like one page and have maybe a half a dozen to maybe 10 story ideas. And Arthur would read through them and go, "Nah, I don't like this one. No." And he'd pick from the list. Once you work on this story. So if he liked an idea, then go back and write, about a 1 or 2 page treatment was what it was called. And that was just kind of a synopsis of the story, just 1 or 2 pages most. And that was to show that there was enough to tell a story. He would read through that and we discuss it, and if it met with his approval, the next stage would be an outline. And the outline would be 4, 5, 6 pages perhaps, and would be every single thing that happens in the episode. No dialogue usually, unless you wanted to just say something for effect. But it's basically, we start out at, say, Castle Grayskull, and the sorceress is talking to HeMan and Teela, and it'd be stated that way, just point by point by point, what was happening in the story. And then once that story was approved, then the script would start. Then you go into script writing and you start staging the action, describing the scene, writing the dialogue, and that would take maybe about a week. That would be about 35 to 40 pages of script. And that would be the first draft. And Arthur would get out his red pen and he would go through it and say, "I like this." He'd write DB, which means do better. If he didn't, or rephrase this line or cut this, and then we go back, go through a second draft. And generally it was a first draft, second draft, and maybe a polish, maybe just to get some little bits fixed. Now, that's the way it works when you get one that gets all the way through and becomes a cartoon. Sometimes the stories don't work and they die either in the first draft or the second draft. And Arthur says, "This isn't working. I'm not going to let you make a cartoon out of this. Put it on a shelf. Come up with something else." And I had a couple of scripts that did that. But I also worked as a story editor, as did Larry DiTilio and J. Michael Straczynski, we would do edits on scripts from outside writers. We were the staff, but there was a need to produce so many shows that we had several freelance writers writing scripts as well. Now, they may have a good story idea, but they may not know the characters as well. And so the staff writers would also have to do rewrites on the outside scripts.
Wow, very very interesting. And speaking of the moment of the creation in general about you, what is your, for example, give an example. When I work on my novel, I schedule. Sometimes I have a subject or synopsis of the story, but sometimes I schedule nothing. I just pick a playlist of music that I call it the soundtrack of my novel. I put the headphones and I start to follow in the river of my creativity, and I find the story. However, what is your, in general, when you write a story, you listen music, or you schedule? Now you talk about something that were committed by someone. But for example, if you want to create a story, also today, what is your way to do a story, and what you do during the process of writing? You listen music, or you prefer the silence?
I do both. Sometimes I have silence, sometimes I have music. Um, my music collection are film soundtracks. And so I can't create with if there's words, no songs, no singing. It's got to be just instrumental music. But generally, when I'm trying to work out a scene in my head, I have to get on my feet and I kind of pace around the room, and I tend to act it out. If it's an action scene, I'm thinking how the action is. Um, I find it hard to sit still, but once I've got it in my head, then I can hammer it out and it'll just flow. But uh, I would tend to just write straightforward, just write right through it, because of the television production process and the policies at Filmation Studio. I had to be more organized. Like I said, I had to present a small idea, then I had to do a short synopsis, and then I had to do a more detailed outline before I was allowed to write a script. But that was in order to, because it took days to write a script, and they didn't want to waste time or money on something that might have problems in it, and so they wanted to fix the problems or eliminate the problems when only a little bit of time had been spent. So that process was at the studio. When I'm writing for myself, I don't do that.
Okay, I understand the difference of the two situations, working for a studio or for myself, because as example, as a musician in the past, I did some soundtrack for some short movie. At the time, I had a schedule. I have a director that asked me every day, always the work, always the work. So you need to still more focus. But when I did some song, I just followed the creativity. So I understand this split, this different side of the creation, and also I understand what do you mean about listen music, instrumental music, or soundtrack for some movie, because it's the same to me. Because if I listen a song, the song in general appears. The song appears also in the story. When I need to put a song in the story, okay, I can listen a song with some words. But to
Mhm.
follow the story, I prefer instrumental music, like you said. I understand
Mhm.
very well this this process, also this approach for to do something. But back to filmation work, there is some character that you create but didn't receive the final approval.
Generally, when writing, again, we were to use the established characters as much as possible, but sometimes whether it be a new villain, or if we had a character that interacted with our heroes. For example, the second script I wrote was called Not So Blind, and that story revolved around a blind boy. Now, the blind boy wasn't a toy; that was a character that I created, and uh, it was one of the stories that had no villains in it. It was kind of an exploration of a story in which HeMan takes a blind boy out on um, a little journey, and in the process, HeMan becomes temporarily blinded, and the blind boy has to help the hero.
Yes, I remember. I
And
remember.
so that was a character that I created, and that was typical with most stories. Is that um, they usually there was some other new character that was introduced for that particular story, and that was not uncommon. That happened in many scripts.
Okay. And speaking of stories and character, another things that I like so much of Filmation is two things. First of all, how you created the story, because when I told you a little bit about that before our show, that when I start to rewatching the show as an adult, as a writer today, I discovered that the story are so great also today, because they haven't a um, typical formula, because sometimes in the kids show, when you are in the middle, you get also the spoiler of the end, because you understand how will be the end of the show. By information, sometimes I watch the time and say, wow, just 5 minutes away before 5 minutes left before the end, and I don't know how we will finish this episode. So I like this philosophy to create a story that is not a typical formula to the beginning and the end of the story.
Mhm.
Tell me something about that.
Well, that depended upon the writing skill of the writer, and some writers will write to a formula. Now, we did have to have certain things in the story. We had to have we needed to have a strong opening. So generally, we wanted to have some kind of action in the beginning of the story. That was especially I remember in Shira, the first few scripts that came out, uh, there was a challenge because the character of Adora was so strong that the writers kept writing her as the main character instead of Shira. It wasn't the Adora show; it was Shira, and so a lot of scripts had to be rewritten to put a Shira action scene in the very beginning of the story, so it wasn't just the Adora show. And as a kid, I remember seeing that a lot in the old Superman TV series, the live action one from the late 50s, early 1960s. It'd be Clark Kent all along, and then finally Superman would show up in the last 10 minutes of the show. So that's something we had to consciously remember, is that this is the He-Man show, this is the She-Ra show. Make sure that they're in the show and prominently. And so um, the only the only formula I would say is that we needed to have a good break in the middle, because there's a commercial break and you don't want people to change channels. So you put your hero or character in jeopardy at the end of the first act, so that when you come back from commercial, you see how they get rescued. So that was something that had to be there, and generally the our heroes had to win. So there is a certain amount of formula there, but we did have a lot of latitude as to how we told the story. And I had to say I was really pleased to work with some very good writers. Larry DiTilio was my favorite writer. My first season as a storyboard artist for HeMan, I got, I think, 3 or 4 scripts by Larry. I got The Dragon's Gift, The Return of Granomir, and House of Chakotay Part 2. All really fantastic stories. And so I got one other one. There was Cosmic Comet. I don't think that was Larry's. At any rate, I enjoyed reading and illustrating his scripts. His stories were so good. Joe Straczynski was also a fine writer. Of course, he went on to write and produce Babylon 5. But he was turning out really excellent stories as well. And so what happens is it made it hard sometimes when we get a script from a freelance writer that wasn't quite up to the level that we wanted to maintain. And generally, if we could fix it, then we would. And that's why you'll see sometimes on the credits, it'll say story by this person, teleplay by me or by Larry or someone else. Generally, we had a rule of thumb. If we only fixed it a little bit, we didn't even put our names on it. But if we fixed a fair amount of it, then we wanted a screen credit. If we rewrote half the thing, we wanted even a bigger screen credit. So it just depended upon the story and how much work was needed. But when you have that many different writers, you're going to get a lot of different ways of telling stories. And I was really pleased to be part of that.
Okay, and speaking of Filmation in general, tell me something about Lou Shimer, because today is like a legend, because was the head of the table of this awesome company. Tell me something about Lou Shimer.
Well, Lou Shimer was a character himself. Very tall, lean man. I always thought he sounded like Jimmy Stewart, who was an old Hollywood actor. But he did voices he did the voice of Orko, give you an idea, and many others in the shows. Lou started out as an animator, and he was not a lot of the heads of studios are not artists, and he was an artist. He worked on TV shows back in the 50s and early 60s, and he got together with Hal Sutherland and Norm Prescott and formed this company. His first show in the mid 60s was in the Adventures of Superman. Later on, they got the Archies and did a lot of other shows. By the time I got to know him was in 1981, and he's very personable, knew most of the people in the studio by name. Interesting thing, the next year, 1982, our cartoonist union went on strike to protest work going overseas to Asia, because we were losing our jobs. Lou Shimer was the last TV studio that kept all the work local. So I had the privilege of working beside animators and background painters and layout artists and special effects artists, and seeing the stuff shot on the cameras and seeing everything was done in one building. And well, when I first started, it was in 3 buildings, but it was all in the same town. And then later we all pulled into one building when the studio moved. That commitment to keeping us working just was amazing. And in that strike in 1982, Lou Shimer actually picketed his own building. He actually walked along with the other artists striking, and we loved him for it. He really cared, and it's funny thing is sometimes we wouldn't agree with the choices he made if he was shown 3 different character designs for a character. He would generally pick he wouldn't pick the best one. And we used to joke and say he was blind. But when I wrote Not So Blind, I named the blind boy after Lou. His name is Loos, Loos. And that was for Lou, S for Shimer. And that was my little inside joke. But he was such a good man, good family man, and he took care of his people, and we'll always be grateful for it. The other thing is that he hired animators that were old. We had multi-generational staff there. There were animators who had been in the business 50 years, who had worked on old Popeye cartoons from the 1930s. And it was just amazing to talk to people that I watched the cartoons when I was a kid. And it was really neat. It was a great place to work. And Lou Shimer was one of my best bosses I've ever had.
Awesome. And I understand your feelings when you talk about the people that work with Popeye, because now I talk with you, they work with the show that they watched when I was a kid. So I have the same feelings in this time, this moment right now.
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
And this is super cool. Tell me something about BraveStarr, All-Star Marshall BraveStarr series.
Well, we had, after we were done with She-Ra, we were done with the Masters line, and we had done Filmation Ghostbusters. There was a character that was designed for Ghostbusters. It was a villain, and it was Tex Hex. It was a kind of a skull-faced bad guy, gunfighter. And when Lou was looking at it, he goes, I like this guy. Let's not put him in Ghostbusters. Let's do something else with him. And Lou kind of put us, the development staff and the writing staff on creating this Western in space. And so it was because of Ghostbusters that we got one character that became the start of BraveStarr. Also, let me go back to Blackstar. Originally, when the show was pitched to CBS network, the character of John Blackstar was supposed to be black, African American, if you will. He was supposed to be a black man, and the people at CBS said, "I don't know if America is ready for a black superhero." And we said, "What are you talking about? We have Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids. We've got black characters in cartoons," but they wouldn't budge. They said, we won't buy the show if he goes that way. So we kept the name, but just gave him a tan. So Lou had always wanted to do a main character, something other than a Caucasian white man. And so when we did BraveStarr, he said, well, let's do a Native American, and let's do make him the hero. And so Marshall BraveStarr became the first ethnic hero that way, at least for Filmation. And the other thing I loved about that show was they decided, rather than going the Star Wars route as far as the look and feel, decided to go more Jules Verne. And it was more steampunk before steampunk was called steampunk. So, but he had lots of gears and valves and pipes and rivets and all that stuff. And that made a lot of fun. It had, we wanted to have that Old West look, but also we had robots, and we had spaceships, and we had turbo mules, flying things. And what we did is retold the gold rush, the California gold rush. The planet of New Texas had this ore called cerium, and it was the mineral that that fueled all the spacecraft. And so that's why there's all. So we got to replay, instead of going for gold, they were going for cerium, and so we had all those things to do with BraveStarr. And actually, the things that we learned from HeMan and She-Ra, we used in BraveStarr. The animators had improved in their skills. If you watch BraveStarr, it's more sophisticated than HeMan. The artwork is stronger, and we had very high hopes for it. But through a series of missteps, it did not become as successful as HeMan by a long shot. But it's still a very, very good show.
Yes, I like it. I like so much BraveStarr also, once again, because you can find the same philosophy of Master of the Universe about the story, but also about how you use the character, because you can recognize the style of Filmation not just only because of the artwork, but also because of the story, to use the character. Because sometimes in some other show you saw too much character in the same time, or maybe just always the same character. In Filmation, they use there is a different episode with different side character. Maybe the main character are the same, but there is a character that appears just in few episodes, another character. So a lot of character that very, very, very good way to use this character, in my opinion, because you see when you see a new character, you understand every new character, because we have a good way to display a character for the first time, and also to use a character one times, another one. Speaking of the side character, no, I like that. I like that at the story, and also I like the BraveStarr. What do you mean? This chemistry between the space and the Western. For example, Cactus Ed, the cactus robot cactus, was a perfect example of this philosophy of the cartoon.
Mhm.
So I like so much that I understand, and I like also what do you mean when you say that because of your work of Master of the Universe and She-Ra, you become better, because for an artist there is a never-ending learning. You learn every day
Mhm.
that you create some stuff, and you become better because the art is something that need you and your mind to growing up every day, in my opinion.
Yeah, so it's like my first season as storyboard artist. You do something often enough and long enough, you do get better at it. And we did and also we were pushing. There was other shows were getting better. We're starting to get shows in from Japan that were starting to show up on American television, and they were doing some things that we weren't doing. And so we would look at them and say, okay, that's good stuff. We need to do something like that too. Camera moves and dynamic staging, some things. So, good art breeds good art. And so we kept trying to raise the bar just a little bit more with each production.
Okay, for the next question, I have a story to tell you, because when I was a kid, as I told you, my four favorite show are four shows from Filmation, but there is one character that was my favorite of all. And take a closer look of my background, because I show you this character. And I want ask you who created this character, what is the background story for this one. I believe they need to go like that. This one, Primeval, the bad guy of Filmation Ghostbusters. Tell me something about behind the scene of this character.
Well, I actually that was done. Um, Let me give you an idea of how shows are born. Basically, we have different departments, different or teams, if you will. There was a development team, and they were constantly coming up with new ideas, and they would, pitch them to Lou Shimer and say, "What about this kind of show? What about this show?" And they develop characters. They would do sketches, and based upon whether Lou liked it or not, they would take it even further. And so while we were working on the second season of She-Ra, meaning storyboard and animators and all the other artists, the development team was working on the next show. And that was Ghostbusters, which was based on an old live action comedy that they did in the 70s. That's a whole nother story. But basically, they wanted to have a big bad villain. They wanted to have this evil place where all the bad guys could be. And there were a lot of jokes, a lot of word puns. I mean, prime evil is in English. Prime evil speaks to about a dinosaur period, but it's a funny name there. And a lot of the other characters' names were very, just jokes and puns like that. Characters like that are kind of a group effort. One person might do a drawing, another person might write the characteristics of the character of who they are, what they're like, how they think, but it doesn't really come to life until the actor voices him. And I'll give you an example. When we were working on first season HeMan, we didn't know what the voice of Skeletor was going to be like. I know myself and other storyboard artists imagined it would be something very menacing and deep, like Darth Vader. And we were surprised when we heard Alan Oppenheimer's Skeletor talking like this. And we went, that's not what we thought about it at all. So now gradually that grew on us, and that became the voice of Skeletor that we knew and loved. And that's what happens, is that it's a team effort. We get the development team creates the first look and refines the character. Then the character design goes to the model department. That team actually does the front, side, and three-quarter views and draws action poses and things like that. And that further develops the character. The writers take the descriptions of what this character is like. Is he pompous? Is he comical? Is he menacing? Is he smart? Is he stupid? Whatever. And they'll take those descriptions and start writing a story around it. And in the course of the story, the character develops more. And so over the course of several episodes, you get to know the character even more. So there's an evolution to the character that happens. It's not just one person and now you have the character and he's ready. It goes through many hands to get to where you see it on the screen.
Awesome. Also, it's so interesting also understand that, because I wonder now that for each character there is this process for each characters of the show of this show. And back to your work as a writer for She-Ra, HeMan, you remember your feelings the first time that you saw on TV your first episode that you wrote?
Yes, yes, I did. My first episode was Into the Abyss for He-Man, in which Tila falls into the bottomless pit around Castle Grayskull. Only, she lands on a ledge and is down there when when Adam transforms to He-Man. She sees all the energy of Grayskull go up in front of her, and I was very pleased with a lot of how it came out, and it was really interesting. I have to say, I was sitting there watching uh, the episode, mouthing the words, saying the words with them because I knew every line. But I was very pleased. It was, but the thing is, let me tell you, it was delayed by several months because it takes 8 months, or it took 8 months from script to screen. So once the script was done, it had to go through the storyboard department, the layout department, the animation department, backgrounds, painting, all that. And it would take literally 8 months. And that's why we had several teams and several episodes being worked on at the same time.
Wow.
And so I wrote it at one time and didn't get to see it till about 8 months later.
Awesome, awesome. And what is between this many show that you work for Filmation? What is your favorite, and why?
Oh, that's like asking a parent who their favorite child is. That's not fair. Um, I There are things I liked about all the shows I worked on. Um, as a writer, I wrote for He-Man and She-Ra. I did one script for Ghostbusters, and I did one for BraveStarr because I was back in the storyboard department after She-Ra. And I have favorite episodes that I wrote, but I really liked, I'd have to say BraveStarr was my favorite, but BraveStarr, He-Man, and She-Ra are all like tied for first place. I mean, it's like just a little bit different. It's not first, second, third. It's like they're right here. So it's a little hard for me to say. I was not as fond of Filmation's Ghostbusters. I liked action adventure, and that was a comedy, and I don't think Filmation was as good at comedy as they were at action adventure. So I would lean towards He-Man, She-Ra, and BraveStarr. I can't
Okay.
pick one.
And before you told me a so interesting story about XX, this guy was created for Filmation Ghostbusters, and then become the main evil of BraveStarr. There are other characters that were scheduled in another show and become a part of another show.
We wanted to have a Blackstar crossover into He-Man, but couldn't do it. I don't remember what was the reason given, but some of us did slip little things in. There's a little in, I believe it's in Skeletor's treasure vault. There's a little statue of the Overlord, or the warlord of the main villain of Blackstar. There's a little statue of him in the background. We did little things like that we snuck in, but other than, no, we weren't able to do too much of that. There was some talk about putting He-Man into BraveStarr, just having
Wow.
him show up. There was some discussion. We did think about it, didn't quite do it, but it at least got discussed.
There is some question on the chat by the fan. Do you like to answer some of them question? maybe there is this one, if you like it, this one by Damien. Rob, you worked on so many 80s classics. However, did you ever have input on certain characters being beloved or also ones that you wish had more limelight?
Hmm. Yes. There was one particular character in Shira. It was part of the toy line, but the toy line, Mattel kept changing it, and then they ultimately did not do that toy. And I had already read it in the script. The character's name was Amber, Mistress of Fire. I had written a script called Amber Waves of Flame, and it was a fire and ice story with Frosta in the Kingdom of Snows. And Amber controlled a volcano, and so we had lava, we had ice and snow and all this. My first draft, it was Amber. Well, when it came to the second draft, we got word that they had changed the character's name from Amber to Volcana. Well, that messed up my title, and but I changed the name, and then they decided to pull the toy. They weren't going to make the toy, and I was told. And the script, actually, to be honest, the script was not one of my best efforts, and so Arthur said, "Look, this is just getting to be a mess. Let's just stop this one." So that was one of my stories that got put on the shelf. It didn't get made, and it was directly because of this character that we were doing Mattel a favor. We were going to take one of their new toys and put it in the story, and then they scrapped the toy, and we scrapped the story. That was one in particular. I wrote the first story that Moss Man appeared in the Ancient Mirror of Avatar, second season HeMan. I was given the task of I was writing this one story, and Arthur says, "Look, I got this character called Moss Man. We haven't put him in a story yet. See if we can find a place for him in yours." I said, "Okay." So I got to introduce Moss Man and give him some character and attitude and so on. So that was my contribution. So.
Cool. Because I like Mossman, it's another character that I like, but I like many characters of Master of the Universe, and I like also how this character comes out in the story, maybe for the first time ever. Also, some character like because Mossman was in not a lot of the episode of Master of the Universe.
I'm just now looking at the questions, the comments.
But there is but this one is very good for you. Says Robert is a legend, says Matthew.
Oh, goodness.
I have a question for you. Speaking of the fan, what is your reaction like at PowerCon? When you meet many people that love your works, what is your feelings of that? You never wondered that when you was in the filmation at the time, that in the future you still in the thoughts of many people that love these shows?
No, had no clue. It was before the internet. We got some fan letters, and we knew that the HeMan show and the Share show were popular because we could see the ratings, the toy sales were big, and so on. So we knew that it was popular with kids, but there was something very different. See, we had popular kids shows when I was a child, and they did not stay with us as an adult like HeMan did for that generation. And when I discovered the HeMan fan world was in 1998. I was just getting on the internet, and I was really trying to connect with some of my Filmation friends. I kept doing different searches, and when I typed in Filmation in my name, I found this website by James Etalk and Zadok and Angel, and it was a site which reviewed at length every episode of He-Man and She-Ra, and they said some very nice things about one of my stories, and so I sent an email saying, "Thank you for the kind words. I'm glad you liked my show." And they went and came at me and peppered me with all these kinds of questions like you have. And that's when I discovered that these young men, these young people that were now 20 something, were kids when the show aired, had the toys, and had a passion for them unlike anything I had as a kid. I mean, the closest thing I could compare to it would be Star Wars or Star Trek fans. And I've just seen it grow and grow and grow, even though our show is now almost 40 years old. And when the toys are just as popular as ever, the fans are now in their 40s, and they it was just fascinating. The same thing is said to me every time someone walks up to me at a convention. They said, "You made my childhood." That's what they say. And they're trying to say how important He-Man and She-Ra were to their childhood. And it just amazes me. I'm thrilled. We had no idea it would have that kind of staying power. We tried to do the best we could. We wanted to make it entertaining, had to be a good show. But wow, never thought it would be this well loved and continue to this day.
And I think that this reaction, these results, is the better gift for an artist, because the dream of an artist is create something that can live forever, and so is a big results for your career. That, in my opinion.
Yes, and I don't know why. I mean, I think it would. I think about this sometimes, talk it over with some of my friends, and we go, "What did we do?" We played a part. We told stories, which helped define characters, and I think it was just the perfect combination of things: the right kind of toys, the right kind of show, and then the kids actually made it all happen, because what they would do is they would see the stories and then they would play out the stories with their toys and make up their own stories about it and take it further. And so that's what made it real to that generation. And it went right to the heart, I guess.
Okay, speaking of toys and show, I remember also, because I have those figures, that, for example, the BraveStarr action figure, they haven't the likeness from the cartoon. Why that? What is the reason why? Because they didn't want to pay the license for Filmation, or there's other reason for that?
I don't know. It's hard to say. There wasn't, unlike a company like Disney that has control over everything. Mattel had control of the toys, and they just would want to do something that would help them sell more toys. Filmation didn't have any connection to the toys, really, other than one or two characters. So whether the toys sold or not did not matter a whole lot to Filmation. We were more interested in getting our shows on the air. And then this live action movie comes out, and I went to see it, and I go, well, that's not art. He-Man, and they ran out of money. So suddenly, instead of being on Eternia, they're now on Earth. And I go, okay, that's because they run out of money. But even so, I know many fans that love that movie. So that's I
Speaking
keep
of
hoping
the
for another one.
Speaking of the movie, I did two interview on this channel with William Stout. That was the guy that created the character for the movie. And by the way, he created also Conan the Barbarian. Work on that
Hmm.
movie.
What?
He told me that speaking of He-Man live action movie, that he did in the beginning was planned to create more scene on Eternia, more part of the story on Eternia, but because of the budget, they changed to turn the story in a for many parts of the story on the earth because to save money. This is the reason why they change. There is a lot of part of the story not in Eternia.
Hmm. William Stout was at PowerCon this year.
Yes, I know, I know.
Yeah.
We become a friend. We did. I did an interview with him. He's an amazing artist, also him. There is another question that I like by Damien Ristori about BraveStarr. Stampede was a terrific but well done character in BraveStarr. What was the story behind his creation? Do you remember something about Stampede?
I don't think I can answer that. I was not involved in that creation, um, but it was interesting because there was, you know, what we had in Shira, we had Hordak, which was the main villain, but we had a Horde Prime that was the. It's kind of like Darth Vader and the Emperor. There's like the villain you see in every episode. Then you have the big boss villain,
Exactly, yes.
and so uh, they followed that pattern. And so Tex Hex was going to be the villain in every episode, but he had a boss, and his boss is Stampede. And of course, what happened in the movie we made, we show how Stampede made him Tex Hex.
Yes, I remember. Yes, and also there is a real comparison between Ord Prime and Stampede because they are inside the cloud. You can see very well the shape of this character appears just a part of the character. So there's something similar in the creation of these two characters. So
Mhm.
I understand we are over our time limits. To me, it's not a problem, but we are over 1 hour. When how much time do you have again? So because
Well, I think we'll have to wrap it up. It's getting late here, and
okay, maybe if you won't come back, maybe we can maybe the next time we can talk a little bit more inside of some of the episodes that you wrote for Filmation if you like it
okay, we can do
next
that.
time because so now because before to say goodbye I need to say thank you so much to join my show because I have a lot of questions, so maybe for if you won't come back in the future, I want to talk more because you do a lot, and maybe the next time we can talk a little bit more inside of some of your episodes that you work at you the story you created of this awesome company. Okay, and now
Yeah.
I go to the piano to the final moments.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching, my friends. And don't forget to rewatch also today the awesome story for Filmation created by Rob Lamb. And thank you, Robert, to join my show. Thank you so much, Rob. And thank you guys to enjoy the show. And remember to all of you guys that this Saturday, Alex Ainke, sculptor for NECA, will be at 9 p.m. Eastern, my next guest. So thank you so much, Rob, to join the show. And thank you to everyone, my friends. And I hope that you come back in the future, Rob, because it
All
was
right.
a
I'd
super
be
cool
happy
moment.
to.
Thank you so much. Goodbye
Okay.
to
Thank you.
everyone. Goodbye, guys. Bye bye, my